Mike Tyson is one of the most notorious boxers on the planet. But back in the early 80s, he was a reformed delinquent taken in by a legendary coach, Cus D'Amato. Cus taught Tyson the ins and outs of his peekaboo-style boxing system, but it was up to Tyson to put it to good use. So today, we're going to look at the very beginning of Iron Mike's journey, examining the techniques that led to his incredible string of KO victories, and the lessons he learned from each new opponent. It all began in 1985. A teenage Mike Tyson had recently suffered from a spat of bad judging in the amateurs, losing decisions to fighters who he had knocked down, but been unable to finish. Now that he was in the pros, he was determined to take it out of the judges' hands. And he managed to do this in his first fight against Hector Mercedes. As he came into his first professional fight, Tyson was incredibly nervous. At first he made a rookie mistake, moving himself into the corner. But his nerves did not last long. He jump-turned out of the corner, then won a dual exchange of jabs, sending his opponent crashing into the ropes. Next, he cornered Mercedes, stepping into southpaw to create an angle for a lead right body shot. When his opponent adjusted his defense, Tyson stepped even further to the side, aligning his left up the middle. Mercedes wisely tried to flee, but ended up in the next corner. Here Tyson showed another prime example of the angles involved in peekaboo boxing. First stepping to his right to triple up on body shots from southpaw, then angling left to double up on body shots from orthodox. Tyson had scored a first-round KO in his very first professional fight. Still, Cus complained that Tyson's guard had been sloppy, and reminded him to keep his hands up for the next fight. Perhaps due to his coach's diligence, the next fight was even easier for the future champ. Tyson's opponent was another boxer new to the pros, and went by the name of Trent Singleton. Tyson closed the distance quickly, staying safe through broken rhythm head movement, and pinned Singleton against the ropes, leaning on him with his head and shoulder. Singleton, to his credit, tried to fight back with a quick flurry, but Tyson not only had the tighter punches, note how his elbows stayed closer to his sides, but also moved his torso with his punches. These two things allowed him a tighter path to his target, guaranteeing that he hit his target first. Singleton got up, but Tyson slipped his jab and then shuffled into a hard lead hook. The Gazelle Punch, a staple of Cus's former student, heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson, sent Singleton to the canvas for the second time. Now that Singleton was thoroughly dazed, Tyson did not need to set up his last exchange. He simply threw, and to his stunned opponent fell one last time. Tyson's last bouts had been against fighters nearly as green as him. His next fight would be against Halpin, a boxer with an average record but much more experience. The ghosts of his decision losses at amateur still haunted him, so Tyson spent the entire month before the fight doing little but running, training, and sparring. It was clear when the fight began that Halpin would not fall so easily as the last two. Journeymen may not be great at winning, but they're often great at surviving. Tyson used this chance to experiment, slipping to either side to try different counters. He practiced sidestepping to either side as well, setting up angles for his power punches. Taking it one step further, he even switched to southpaw and back multiple times. However, it was in the fourth that Tyson showed his ability to transition between stances mid-exchange, and it was this ability that landed him the first knockdown of the fight. Tyson connected with the big left hook, then turn-shifted into southpaw to connect with his right. This was also a common tactic of Marvin Hagler, but Tyson used it in reverse, as Hagler tended to turn-shift from southpaw to orthodox. In both cases, the lead hook moves the opponent into the next punch, the sudden stance switch cutting off their escape. Miraculously, Halpin got up, so Tyson gave him a double Halpin and felled him with the exact same sequence. This time, he wisely stayed down. Afterwards, Cus told Tyson he should have thrown more body shots and used even more lateral movement. Tyson's next opponent was Ricardo Spain. Not only did Spain have a name that sounded like it was out of a boxing manga, he was also a major step up for Tyson, with 7 wins and 0 losses. What's more, the bout would be televised on ESPN. This was a make or break moment for young Kid Dynamite. But as formidable as Spain looked, he made the mistake of trying to stand toe-to-toe with Mike. Tyson threw a 1-2. Spain managed to slip and counter with a cross of his own, and then, in a blink of an eye, Tyson pulled back to avoid the cross and intercepted with a hard lead hook. Spain went down. He got back up to his feet and unwisely charged right at Tyson again. This time Tyson jabbed and both men threw rights, each slipping inside. They married each other yet again with dual lead hooks, but Tyson pivoted into his hook, getting out of the way and shortening the path of his own punch. Spain hit air, Tyson didn't, and that was the fight. Tyson now had 4 pro fights and 4 KOs. However, there had been one glaring weakness in all of Tyson's opponents. Like Tyson, they were all shorter heavyweights. Now it was time for Tyson to fight a giant. Tyson's next opponent was Josh Alderson and stood at 6'4". Luckily for Tyson, he proved immediately that he could get under Alderson's jab, using lateral movement to cut off the ring and stellar head movement to stay safe. After slipping or weaving, Tyson would come up from his crouch with his own thunderous jab. But while Tyson could close the distance, Alderson managed to continually tie Tyson up in the clinch. While Tyson showed that he was strong enough to not be moved around by the larger man, his offense was still being shut down consistently. But in the second, Alderson started throwing power punches, and this gave Tyson the opening that he needed. He ducked under a right and shuffled past the center line to linear shift, putting both himself and Alderson into a southpaw stance. Now that Alderson was in an unfamiliar position, Tyson easily connected with a tight lead hook. Alderson flew back, but stayed upright. Tyson pursued and was tied up twice. But then, Tyson caught up with one of his jabs. Alderson tried to duck under, and Tyson tracked his head movement, connecting with a tremendous right. Showing great resolve, he got back to his feet. But the exact same sequence replayed itself a moment later. Alderson once again slumping to the canvas. For the third knockout, Tyson didn't need to jab, as Alderson did it for him. Tyson slipped and came over the top with an overhand for the third and final knockout. The two retired to their corners, and the doctor announced that Alderson could not continue. Tyson now had 5 KOs for his first 5 fights, most within a few rounds or less. However, it would only get harder from here. People were starting to take notice, and those in the boxing world were eager to see just how the 18-year-old Mike Tyson would fare in the world of professional heavyweight boxing. Stay tuned for more breakdowns just like this, and leave suggestions for content you want to see in the comments. Check out my books on footwork, power, and defense, linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.